The deep sea is a food-poor environment. As we explored in parts 1 and 2, photosynthesis cannot occur below 200 meters, and animals must rely either on scraps of food sinking from above or specialize to survive at seafloor regions where primary production is possible via the process of chemosynthesis. The synthesis of organic compounds by microbes using energy derived from reactions involving inorganic chemicals. We've taken a look at the two main examples of chemosynthetic oases, hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, to explore how life has adapted to survive here. But on the seafloor, food fall events have also been known to create temporary sites of partial chemosynthesis. In particular, the carcasses of whales or the remains of sunken wood host uniquely specialized assemblages of life. Let's take a closer look. In the case of sunken whale carcasses, the supply of organic material supports an ecological succession of communities over time. During the first stage, vibrant assemblages of mobile scavengers gather out of the depths and strip the bones of all flesh in a matter of months. The enrichment opportunist stage follows, during which invertebrates colonize the bones and make the most of any remaining organic material that enriches the surrounding sediments. But it's the third stage, called the sulfophilic stage, when the carcass begins to support chemosynthetic life. This is due to whale bones being incredibly rich in lipids. After bone-eating Ozydax worms begin to colonize and burrow down into the skeleton, anaerobic bacteria are able to get into the core to exploit the lipids. As they break these down, they produce sulfide as a byproduct, which seeps out and can support bacterial mats of chemosynthetic microbes that carpet the whale bones. The result is a temporary, localized chemosynthetic environment able to support a community of animals surviving not on flesh, but on the energy released by the microbes. We find grazers like amphipods and suspension feeders like tube worms blooming out of the surrounding sediment. But of the organisms that participate in this stage of succession, very few species are shared with hydrothermal vents and cold seeps. Because these chemosynthetic oases are relatively short-lived, animals here may represent ancestral species belonging to the lineages of specialized vent and seep inhabitants. Thus, whale falls may serve as ecological stepping stones that once drove the evolution of life to such conditions. With around 1,600 new whale carcasses settling on the seafloor each year, and with each one lasting several decades, these islands of abundance are relatively common. The distance between carcasses may only be tens of kilometers, so it's conceivable that whale falls may provide an evolutionary interface between non-chemosynthetic seafloor scavengers and the highly specialized animals that appear well suited to life at vents and seeps. This is not true, however, of other types of food falls. While the high bone lipid content of whales makes their carcasses unique, most other carcasses are too small to support such complex communities. These mackerel, attached to an ROV and sent to the seafloor, were devoured in less than a day. This jellyfish, consisting of soft, gelatinous flesh, was consumed entirely in a matter of hours. Other large vertebrates like this devil ray, observed at 1.2 kilometers deep off the coast of Angola, appear to be less appetizing. This was the first time a natural ray food fall had ever been documented, and yet, despite being covered with more than 50 eel pouts, a considerable amount of flesh endures, more than what you'd expect of a carcass this large. The cartilage that makes up the skeleton is too thin for bone worms and bacteria to colonize. The sandpaper-like skin is too tough for the jaws of many scavengers, and the high levels of ammonia found within the flesh of sharks and rays make them an unpalatable meal. Even the carrion of larger elasmobranchs, like this whale shark, are too much of a challenge for most animals. It's for this reason that whales are considered keystone species, providing vital ecosystem services in both life and death. Deep beneath the ocean surface, familiar but unexpected features can be found resting against the sea floor. When trees become uprooted by storms or ships capsize at sea, losing their buoyancy as the pressure of the ocean forces out any air trapped within, bits of wood sink to the ocean floor where they create fleeting oases of life. So it comes as no surprise that the deep ocean hosts complex biological communities that are adapted to thrive on this sunken wood. They're called woodfalls, and they're able to support these biological hotspots by providing both a concentrated source of nutrients and a solid surface that sessile animals can anchor to. Colonies of peculiar bivalves encrust the surface of the wood. Belonging to the genus Xylophaga and growing no longer than an inch, these bivalves are woodfall specialists. They're endemic to these regions, not found in the surrounding sediments or indeed at any other site of chemosynthetic primary production on the seafloor. This is because, in order to consume the solid fibrous wood, they have had to specialize, evolving a number of traits that not many species possess. A ridged, beak-like shell is used to bore into the wood, while a large muscular foot extends from the shell and is used for leverage. They behave like living chisels. The bivalves ingest the fragments they break off, but even now the wood is tricky to digest without help. The polymers cellulose and lignin, which stiffen wood, are indigestible to all but some fungi and bacteria. Thus, Xylophaga host endosymbiotic bacteria within their gills that do the hard work of digesting the wood for them. This way of life is similar to that adopted by another species of bivalve, the inaccurately named giant shipworm. Unlike Xylophaga, these can reach a meter in length, but like their smaller cousins, they use the two valves of their shell to bore through wood. While the Xylophaga bore through the inner sapwood and heartwood, squat lobsters of the species instead opt for the outer layers. Rather than boring, the squat lobsters have developed spoon-like claws that tear away at the wood surface. They too then employ the services of bacteria to help digest the wood. The bivalves and squat lobsters represent the astounding ability of life to make the most of any available resource. For these are deep-sea animals adapted to thrive on land plants. In many ways, these ecosystems mirror the detrital communities that form on terrestrial deadwood, where worms and beetles break down the debris and cycle the nutrients back into the ecosystem, enriching surrounding sediments. In fact, both are dominated by crustaceans. On land, woodlice burrow down into felled stumps and branches, while in the depths it's their cousins, the squat lobsters, that take advantage of this resource. Another similarity is that woodlice, termites and other terrestrial detritivores must also rely on endosymbiotic bacteria to help digest the wood. But one key difference between deadwood habitats on land and out at sea can be explained by taking a closer look at the microbial life of deep-sea woodfalls. The aforementioned bacteria that are able to break down the wood do so anaerobically, forming sulfide as a byproduct. This sulfide can then be used by chemosynthetic bacteria, making woodfall sites of partial chemosynthetic primary production, similar to whale falls, and providing an alternative source of nutrition that other animals not specially adapted to feed on wood can exploit. This footage shows wood debris on the seafloor being converted into a sulfidic hotspot. A microbial sulfur biofilm rapidly develops on its surface, setting up the foundations of a vibrant food web that relies on these chemosynthetic microbes. Bathymodiolus mussels are one example of an animal that relies not on the wood itself, but on the chemosynthetic microbes exploiting the nutrients they produce. Unlike the woodfall specialists, these mussels are not endemic. In fact, they belong to the same genus that colonizes other varieties of chemosynthetic oases, the towering chimneys of deep-sea hydrothermal vents, and the carbonate reefs and mounds of methane ice that form at cold seeps. Their presence here at woodfalls indicates just how important these isolated food sources are to deep-sea biodiversity. Evidence suggests that they serve as wooden stairs for certain animals, ecological stepping stones that allow the mussels to disperse between vents and seeps in a similar manner to whale falls. Both environments may form corridors on the seafloor that allow chemosynthetic communities to spread to new chemically similar habitats. And they do so by producing thousands of larvae, released into the ocean where the first stage of their life cycle sees them waterborne. Currents disperse the larvae far and wide, inevitably bringing some to suitable sites of chemosynthesis where they can settle and begin to grow. The rapid utilization and exploitation of wood by deep-sea organisms means woodfalls are often short-lived. In the case of sunken vessels, a wooden hull may last less than 100 years before it is fully decayed, meaning wrecks like this 207-year-old whaling ship in the Gulf of Mexico endure as nothing more than a patch of scattered artifacts. Seen here is part of the ship's tryworks, large iron pots that were used to boil down blubber. But in March of 2022, the wreck of Ernest Shackleton's ship was found with all its wood intact, 107 years after it was lost in 1915. Situated 10,000 feet below the ocean's surface in Antarctica, it appears suspended in time. This is because woodfalls here are rare, and animals in the Southern Ocean have not adapted to use wood as a food source. With the nearest landmass, Antarctica, being devoid of any trees, there has been no pressure to do so. In addition, animals that are capable of breaking down wood are unable to migrate this far south. The sharp temperature gradient at the Antarctic polar front served as a barrier to these animals, but despite hosting no fauna that is able to digest the wood itself, is still an oasis of life for deep-sea creatures that use it as a solid surface to attach to. The colonizers are predominantly filter feeders, making use of specialized appendages to pull organic particles out of the ocean, dead animals and excrement sinking from above. Sea lilies, a type of echinoderm closely related to starfish, use hair-like structures to adopt this way of life, living alongside sea squirts which instead trap food by cycling water in and out through tube-like siphons. A Brisingid sea star also decorated the helm, waving its arms in the water to catch debris. Anemones the size of dinner plates adorn the ship, representing a fascinating phenomenon called polar gigantism. One unexpected hitchhiker on there was a small white crab, the first time a crab has been observed in the Weddell Sea. Similar communities to those observed tend to dominate metal shipwrecks in other parts of the ocean, including many that endure from the Second World War. Close to the seafloor, currents are slowed by friction, preventing the oxygen and food from being transported here. So not only do shipwrecks provide vital attachment points amidst the soft muds of the abyssal plain, but they also allow seafloor dwellers to reach faster, more nutrient and oxygen-rich currents. This is true of the wreck of the dotted with long white corals reaching up into the flow of water. In conclusion, food falls highlight the ways in which seemingly isolated deep-sea ecosystems are more interconnected than they seem at first look. Whale falls and woodfalls are vital stepping stones that allow opportunistic deep-sea creatures to disperse and colonize new regions and adapt to new conditions and ways of life. But they're also important islands on the seafloor for non-chemosynthetic life, with man-made wrecks creating unexpected foundations for corals, anemones, and the innumerable species that rely on them for food and shelter.